The jarring shriek of the emergency alert cut through the otherwise peaceful Saturday morning quiet of my Seattle apartment. A grating, digital whine that felt designed to bypass any semblance of sleep-induced tranquility. My phone, resting innocently on the bedside table, pulsed with angry red light. The screen flashing the stark, white message. Emergency alert. Time distortion event detected near Seattle. Avoid all reflections and mirrors. Remain indoors and undercover until further notice. Tune to local news channels and official government broadcasts for updates. Time distortion event near Seattle. Avoid reflections and mirrors. My brain, still sluggishly recalibrating from a late night of coding and questionable instant ramen, sputtered and stalled, trying to make sense of the bizarre pronouncement. Time distortion sounded like something ripped from a half-baked sci-fi flick. Not a genuine emergency alert flashing across my phone in my perfectly ordinary, if slightly cluttered, bedroom. Mirrors? Why mirrors? It was all so nonsensical, so utterly out of left field that my first instinct was to dismiss it as some kind of elaborate prank, a sophisticated hack, or maybe even just a truly bizarre weather warning gone horribly wrong. Seattle was known for its strange weather. After all, maybe time distortion was just a new, hip term for unusually heavy fog or something equally mundane. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes. The gritty feeling under my lids a familiar reminder of too many hours staring at code, and squinted at my phone again just to make sure I hadn't hallucinated the whole thing in my half-awake state. Nope, still there, in stark white against the angry red, the same unsettling message repeating in an endless loop, the words burning themselves into my consciousness. Time distortion. Avoid mirrors. It was unnerving. I glanced out the window, half expecting to see, I don't even know what. Clocks running backwards? People phasing in and out of existence? The sky itself warping and twisting into some Assyrian nightmare? But the view outside was stubbornly, infuriatingly normal. The typical Seattle gray overcast hung heavy over the city, the space needle poking to the low clouds like a metallic needle threading a gray shroud. Rain, or at least a perpetual thread of it, hung in the air, the dampness seeping into everything, even the supposedly waterproof walls of my apartment building. The distant ferry horn groaned mournfully across Puget Sound, a familiar sound, a comforting sound, a sound that stubbornly refused to acknowledge any impending temporal anomalies. It was all so utterly, depressingly ordinary, the kind of mundane Seattle Saturday morning I'd woken up to countless times before. And yet, that emergency alert had cast a long, unsettling shadow over everything, a discordant note in the otherwise familiar symphony of my life. I took a swig of my lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste doing little to dispel the sudden chill that had settled over me despite the relatively cozy temperature of my apartment. Probably just a mistake, I told myself, desperately clinging to the thread of rationalization. Some kind of technical error at the emergency broadcast station. They'd probably issue a retraction any minute now, laughing it off as a funny little mix-up. Oops. Sorry, folks. Just a minor space-time hiccup. Back to your lattes and brunch now. Yeah, right. Time distortion event. Avoid mirrors. That didn't sound like a minor hiccup. That sounded like something else entirely. And the avoid mirrors part, that was the real kicker. It was so specific, so bizarre, so utterly without context. Why mirrors? What could mirrors possibly have to do with a time distortion event? Unless the mirrors themselves were somehow involved. Unless they were affected. Unless they were dangerous. I shook my head, trying to dislodge the unsettling thought. No need to get all paranoid over a silly alert. I was probably just overreacting, letting my imagination run wild, as usual. It's what I did best, after all, concocting elaborate worst-case scenarios in my head, fueled by too much caffeine and a healthy dose of Seattle-induced existential dread. It was a talent of sorts, yet a thoroughly useless and often anxiety-inducing one. I decided to turn on the TV, see if there were any actual news reports about this time distortion event, or if it was just my phone acting up, being its usual unreliable, glitchy self. Flipping through the channels with the remote, I landed on Channel 5, the local NBC affiliate, and there it was, the same red and white emergency banner, plastered across the bottom of the screen. interrupting the usual Saturday morning gardening shows and local business spotlights. The anchor, a middle-aged man with a perpetually concerned expression, was sitting stiffly behind his desk, his usual professional composure visibly strained, his eyes darting nervously off-screen as he spoke. "We interrupt this program for an urgent emergency bulletin," he announced, his voice tight, lacking its usual smooth, reassuring tone. "We are receiving confirmed reports of unusual temporal anomalies detected in the Seattle metropolitan area. Authorities are issuing a citywide advisory to remain indoors and undercover until further notice. Repeat, remain indoors. Furthermore, and this is critical, residents are strongly advised to avoid all reflective surfaces, including mirrors, windows, and screens. Repeat, avoid all reflections and mirrors. This is due to potential unpredictable effects associated with the detected time distortion event. Stay tuned to official channels for further instructions. This is not a test. Temporal anomalies? Unpredictable effects? Avoid all reflections?" He was actually saying it on live TV in that same strained, almost disbelieving tone, like he himself was struggling to process the words coming out his mouth. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a mistake. This was real. Something was actually happening. And it was serious enough to interrupt Saturday morning TV and put that look of genuine, if thinly veiled, fear on a local news anchor's face. "Avoid all reflections and mirrors," he repeated, the words echoing in the suddenly silent living room, hanging in the air like a curse. "Avoid all reflections and mirrors." The phrase was starting to burrow into my brain, planting seeds of doubt and apprehension, a chilling command that resonated with the earlier alert on my phone. Why? Why should we avoid reflections? What was so dangerous about mirrors in a time distortion event? My gaze drifted involuntarily to the small mirror hanging on the wall near the TV, then to the darkened screen of the TV itself, reflecting back a distorted, ghostly image of my own living room. Reflections. Mirrors. Suddenly, the familiar surfaces in my apartment felt different. Menacing, almost like hidden doorways to something unknown, something dangerous. I grabbed my phone again, opening Twitter, hoping for some kind of explanation, some context beyond the cryptic warnings. My feed was, predictably, a chaotic explosion of speculation, misinformation, and outright panic. Hashtag time distortion. Hashtag Seattle anomaly. Hashtag avoid mirrors. The hashtags were trending, and the posts were coming in a frantic torrent of questions, rumors, and increasingly bizarre claims. Screenshots of the emergency alert were everywhere, interspersed with panic pleas for information, nervous jokes that fell flat, and inevitable conspiracy theories. Government experiments gone wrong. Alien incursions, some kind of temporal weapon being tested on the unsuspecting population. People were reporting things, strange occurrences, flickering lights, clocks running backwards, objects seeming to shift and disappear, fleeting glimpses of something in mirrors, distorted faces, shadowy figures, glimpses of places that weren't their own apartments, moments that seemed to replay themselves, looping endlessly in reflective surfaces. Some were dismissing it as mass hysteria, collective anxiety amplified by social media. Others were claiming to have seen more truly disturbing images in mirrors, things that made their skin crawl, things that defied explanation, things that seemed to look back. And the warnings were spreading just as fast as the fear. Do not look in mirrors. Do not trust reflections. Do not engage with what you see in the glass. It will take you. It will trap you. It will change you. My stomach churned with a growing sense of dread, my mind struggling to reconcile the mundane reality of my apartment with the escalating chaos unfolding online, the whispers of a dangerous, time-distorting anomaly, and the chilling warnings about mirrors permeating the digital airwaves. And then I saw it, a tweet buried deep in the frantic stream, from an account with disturbingly cryptic username, @Chronos_shadow. "They are not distortions," it read, stark and chillingly direct. "They are glimpses of what was, of what will be. Mirrors are doorways. Do not linger. Do not look too long. They are watching from the other side, and they are hungry. They are watching from the other side, and they are hungry. Who was they? And what were they hungry for? Hungry for time? Hungry for us? The tweet was vague, paranoid, almost nonsensical. But it resonated with a primal fear that was already gnawing at me, the deep-seated unease that had taken root since the emergency alert first blared. It was just a random tweet from an anonymous account, probably just some internet troll trying to stir up trouble. But in the current climate of fear and uncertainty, it felt different, ominous, like a warning whispered from the other side of the mirror. My phone buzzed again, another emergency alert. Emergency alert update. Citywide shelter-in-place order now in effect for Seattle. All residents are required to remain indoors. Cover all mirrors and reflective surfaces immediately. Do not look into any reflections. Maintain complete visual obstruction of all mirrors. Law enforcement and emergency services are deploying blackout materials. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Mandatory shelter-in-place order? Cover all mirrors? Complete visual obstruction? Blackout materials? That was a significant escalation. And blackout materials, that sounded like they were taking this mirror thing seriously. Like it wasn't just a suggestion, but a life or death imperative. I went to the TV again, switching channels frantically, hoping for some last-minute news, some real explanation before the blackout order descended, before the city plunged into a mirrorless darkness. Channel 5 was still static, frozen on the emergency banner. The anchor strain faced now a ghostly, unchanging image. Channel 4, same. Channel 7, ditto. Every channel, every station silent, blank, dead. The airwaves had gone dark, replaced by the same digital void that had swallowed the internet, the phone lines, the very fabric of communication. The silence in my apartment was deafening now, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator and an increasingly frantic thumping of my own pulse. I felt utterly isolated, cut off from the outside world, trapped in a bubble of digital silence and manufactured fear, surrounded by reflective surfaces that were now potential portals to something unknown, something dangerous, something watching. And then I saw it, or rather, I didn't see it. Not directly, but out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement, something in the small mirror hanging on the wall. The one I'd been trying to ignore, the one I knew I shouldn't look at, but couldn't quite resist glancing towards, just for a second, just to make sure. The flicker again. A fleeting distortion of reflection, a subtle ripple in the glass, like heat haze, like water disturbed by a passing breeze, but wrong, unnatural, and fleeting. Gone in an instant, leaving behind only the normal, mundane reflection of my living room, the familiar clutter, the worn furniture, the empty space where I'd been standing just a moment ago. But it had been there. I knew it had. Something had shifted in the mirror. Something had moved. Something had changed. And it was watching. I could feel it now. A prickling sensation on the back of my neck. A cold draft in the air. A sense of presence. Something unseen. Something unheard. But undeniably there. In the mirror. Watching me. Waiting. My breath hitched in my throat. I had to cover the mirrors. All of them. Before it was too late. Before whatever was in there came out. I started to move frantically, adrenaline surging through my veins, overriding the paralyzing fear, replacing it with desperate, almost frantic energy. I ripped down curtains, blankets, sheets, anything I could find to block out the reflections, to create a barrier between me and the mirrors, between me and them. I worked frantically, tearing down the mirror from the wall, smashing against the floor, shattering the reflective surface into a million glittering shards, then covering the shards with blankets, burying them under layers of fabric. Try to erase them from existence, to obliterate their reflective power. I covered the windows with blankets, plunging the apartment into near darkness, sealing off the outside world, trapping myself inside a cocoon of fabric and fear. I covered the TV screen with a thick quilt, silencing its ghostly reflection, erasing its potential as a portal, a doorway, a window into the other side. I covered every reflective surface I could find. The chrome toaster, the stainless steel kettle, the glass coffee table, even the slightly polished surface of my laptop screen, burying them all under layers of cloth, smothering their reflective power, plunging the apartment into a suffocating darkness, broken only by the faint glow of my phone screen, still buzzing with alerts, still flashing those dire warnings. When I was finished, I stood in the center of the darkened room, breathing heavily, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, surrounded by mountains of fabric, shrouded in a self-imposed blackout, trapped in a world without reflections, a world without mirrors, a world without myself. And then I heard it, or rather, I didn't hear it. The silence. It was different now. Not just the absence of sound, but heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to absorb sound, to dampen the very air itself. A silence that felt alive. Listening, waiting, and then the reflection. Despite the covered mirrors, despite the blackout curtains, despite the utter darkness of the room, a faint reflection began to appear. Not on a mirror, not on a window, not on any physical surface, but in the air itself, a shimmering, indistinct reflection, hovering in the darkness, forming slowly, deliberately, taking shape before my very eyes. A reflection of me, but not me, not quite. Something distorted, something wrong. The reflection shimmered, pulsed, wavered, then slowly, deliberately began to move, not mirroring my movements, not mimicking my actions, but moving independently, with a will of its own, with a purpose I couldn't understand, with an intent I couldn't fathom. The reflection reached out a hand, a distorted, elongated hand, reaching through the darkness, reaching toward me, reaching from the other side. And then the voice. Not outside, not on the radio, not on TV, not even in my head, but from the reflection itself. A voice that was not my own, but somehow familiar. A voice that spoke from the darkness, from the mirror, from the other side. A voice that whispered my name, a voice that promised something. Don't be afraid. The reflection whispered, its voice echoing in the darkness, a chorus of voices, layered, distorted, unsettlingly calm. We are you. We are waiting. We are time. And as the reflection reached for me, as its distorted hand closed around mine, as the darkness consumed me, as the voices whispered my name, I understood. It wasn't the mirrors I should have avoided. It was myself. If you felt a chill run down your spine as a reflection emerged from the darkness. And the whispers began, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Your support allows me to delve deeper into the unsettling depths of reflections and bring you more tales from the other side of the glass. Hit that notification bell to ensure you never miss a new descent into the mirrored abyss. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying reflections are not the ones we see in a mirror, but the ones that stare back from within.